and welcome back to Workshop 2 of the Profitable Podcasting Intensive, specifically for service-based businesses. But if you're not a service-based business, you can learn a lot as well. So my name is Anne-Marie Cross. I want to know where you are joining me from, so leave a comment in the comment box below, whatever platform you are using and watching this on. Want to know where you are from and what's the weather like. At the moment here in Melbourne, it's overcast, so a good, and raining too, off and on, so a good day to be inside. So as you're sharing that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got a lot to cover again today. If you are joining me for the very first time, please make sure that you go and catch up on Workshop 1, where we talked about podcasting myths and some of the mistakes that people make, as well as the principles to really help you build a podcast that you can grow and really leverage your business growth from, because it's something that I've been doing for a number of years now, and want to show you how you can do that. Also, too, yesterday we had a Q&A and lots of great content there and conversation as well as we're learning. So Kayleen, good morning from Melbourne. Again, you've not moved. Okay, me neither. Well, not that we can go many places anyway. Our travel has been restricted, which is all good. You know, we can catch up on all the jobs that we haven't done over the last, I don't know how many years. So good to see you again today. So today we're going to talk about the 3 podcast profit models. For those of you who don't know me yet, Anne-Marie Cross is my name. I've been dubbed the podcasting queen. Wish I could claim that I came up with that title. Can't do that. My community and my audience, my guests started calling me that many years ago, and I've kind of embraced that. But my background is in brand, personal branding, communications, and of course we're now leveraging that to really come up with some powerful podcast strategies that help you build your reach, help you build your reputation as a trusted authority, as well as your revenue in your business. So again, as always, if you've been hanging around me for a while, you'll know that I just can't stand fluff. I talk very quickly, so speed up your listening. I'll slow down a little bit and we'll meet somewhere in the middle. But I do have a lot of content. So to get the best from the event, make sure that you've got some water or your favorite beverage, that you are sitting somewhere where you can watch and take down lots of notes. Those of you who've got the action guide, if you haven't already, go and download that, podcastingwithpurpose.com/intensive, and you can download that. We'll send that through to you so that you can take notes. But for now, just a pen and paper will be really handy. A couple of things that I want to remind you of. If you are joining me here for the first time, you would have heard me say this is so important. Act as if you paid for this event. There's something that changes. You know, often people think, oh, it's a free event, it's not going to be much value. Well, that may be for other people, but prepare to just have a lot of value. That's one of my core values, is to bring excellence into the work that I do. And so leave any self-doubt behind and overwhelm behind as well. Today and all of the days that I'm sharing, I want to give you an overview of the things that you need to have in place. Be informed why this is so important so that you can get some real results. I am only scratching the surface. I know many of you are thinking, my goodness, this is great. I've seen some of the ahas, which is fabulous. And, you know, it's one of those things, the more you start to learn, the more you realize, or the less you realize how much you don't know. It's one of those things. You don't know what you don't know. And for those of you who are thinking, well, how am I going to implement this all? Just take today and the rest of the days during this intensive as a way to inform yourself so you can make a better decision about whether a podcast is something that you want to start leveraging in your business. For some of you, you'll realize you've got to take a step back because you haven't really built out those core business foundations. Go back to the last 2 sessions that I've had, and you'll see why. Podcast is a fantastic way to really leverage and really expand and amplify what you are doing, but not if what you're already doing isn't working and is not generating you results. Podcast is not a silver bullet. It'll amplify the results that you're already getting. So if you're not really getting the results you want, it's going to continue to amplify that. So you need to go back. This is all about business building and podcasting. If you are here because you just want to know the different technologies to get, go to Google, go to YouTube, lots of fantastic videos there. You would have heard me say message before make a model of the microphone, because you cannot edit and mix compelling content that nurtures your customers, that compels them and converts them into paying customers, even if it was recorded on the most expensive microphone. It just won't work for you. Okay. If you've got any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. If I have a bit of time at the end of today's session, I will go back, I'll circle back and I'll answer them. Or if it's relevant through the content that I'll share, I'll quickly answer that quickly. But I do want to keep focused on the content today so that you can take away what you need as you are layering your learning. I love to say that, layering your learning. But tomorrow we have another Q&A, so don't worry if I don't get to answer your questions today. I will answer them tomorrow as well. So come back tomorrow, and of course on Friday where we have the last of the workshops. But it doesn't end there either. So good evening from McLennan in Florida. Good evening, good evening. Good to see you here again today. Now, who loves prizes? I love prizes. In actual fact, I won a $20,000 scholarship at the beginning of this year for participating in one of a similar event, not to do with podcasting, another complete, topic that I was interested in learning more about. And I did what we needed to do, not expecting to win, and I won. So at the end of today, I'm going to share with you how you can get your kind of a registration, if you will, into the running for a scholarship for when we open the doors to my next 90-day Idea to Launch Your Thought Leader podcast. So stick around to the end. So I want to do a bit of a recap, number one, because some of you may be new here and I want you to be mindful of what we've covered. Number two, if you've already been here with me before in workshop one, this is going to be a great reminder to be able to really layer that learning. So now Kayleen has just said to me that she's lost me. Am I back? Or maybe it was your end. I don't know. I'm going to keep talking. So Kayleen, hopefully you have listened or you can still hear me. Just give me a thumbs up. Someone there, give me a thumbs up that you can hear me. Hopefully you can. Okay, back. Great to see you again. So there's 3 mistruths. Your microphone will make the difference in having a successful podcast. It won't. And when I talk about success, I'm talking about generating results. Yes, your audio quality has to be able to be heard, because if people can't hear you or it's very distracting because the sound quality is just rubbish, then you need to be mindful of that. But again, do not focus on technology alone. Another myth is publish your podcasts and clients will come. We can use the same analogy of, build your website and clients will come. It just doesn't happen. There's strategy involved. And even after you publish your podcast, there's things that you need to have in place. Here's another one. Get listed in the new and noteworthy on Apple and it will be a success. And you heard me share a principle, a podcasting principle, is focus on building your reputation equity and not focusing on vanity metrics, because vanity metrics will only go so far. It's not going to turn into business, especially if you don't have the right strategy and foundations in place. Recapping the mistakes: no clear or not the correct strategy. One size does not fit all. Your business, the growth stage of your business, what you're looking to achieve is all your ideal customers. It's all going to determine the strategy and what you decide to do. And one of the things that I'll often say when they say, what are the key rules to podcasting? I say, lean in. Let me tell you, because I know the rule. And the rule is, don't tell anyone else, there are no rules to podcasting. There are no rules other than the rules you set yourself. And I have got a statement that I kind of follow, is that rules are meant to be broken, especially stupid rules. Stupid rules, you can break them, especially if you make them yourself in your business, because you'll start to monitor and see, what is the outcome of the feedback that I'm getting from my customers. Do they prefer shorter podcasts? Do they prefer longer podcasts? And what about your bandwidth? How often are you able to publish and the length. It's all going to determine the rules that you set for yourself. So please don't listen to people who say, this is what you have to do. You don't have to do that at all. It depends on you and your business. No lucrative niche, unclear thought leader, brand and message, broad range of topics, off-brand, podcast creative, uninspiring show and episode introductions, and ineffective calls to actions. All those things are things that you'd want to avoid. Go back to workshop 1 if you need me to dive deeper into that with you. Here are some ahas. I love these. My ahas, I realized that I'm actually way past ready to leverage my business. Shocking and scary. Been trying to do this for a while and have ended up with big debt and lots of information about marketing that hasn't really been helpful. So back to the drawing board. I look forward to learning more about scaling and using marketing for a one-person business ready to expand once again. Yes, yes, and yes. One of the things that I have done over the years, and you would have seen a post recently on LinkedIn, is I used to be a course junkie. I used to do every single course because I felt that I needed it, only to realize that a lot of what people were teaching wasn't relevant to me. And then I look at it from very much of an integrated strategy, that a podcast sitting on its own is just one thing, but if you integrated in other things that you're doing in your business and all of those things work well together, you really can build a level of momentum that many businesses hope to achieve. But because it's not integrated and they're trying to do a lot of things and they're trying to tap into the next course, which says this is the course that you need, or this is the tool that you need, it's BS. We need to just take a step back and go, what's my business? Where do I want to take my business, and how can I model this to suit my business model and my offerings? And so that's really important. So thank you so much for that. Glenna said, thanks for your guidance. Biggest aha was in refining my message even more. I've got too many niches and they seem to be collapsing into one. Have to separate them out. Absolutely. If you don't have a clear enough message and, the things that you talk about in your topics, it's not going to position you as a trusted authority because your message is spread too thin. Remember, I said to you that I stopped production of my podcast, Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, which won an award and is often has been referenced in top business podcasts and entrepreneurial podcasts and marketing podcasts. But my message got lost in the noise of my own podcast because I didn't have that clear guest strategy in place. Kayleen says, biggest ha-has, lots of messages can be interesting, but to watch the message doesn't get lost in the noise, in your own media and your own noise. Absolutely. Be careful what you stack at the front of a podcast and not assume the listener knows you yet. Exactly. Having a specific format and different content and just going, you know what, we're just going to interview anyone and I've got my show notes in front of me and off I go. Well, if you haven't considered, where am I using my podcast? Where in the customer journey? Is it for new customers or is it existing customers that I'm going to retain? And I want to retain and I want to also upsell because there's certain products and programs that I want to start to seed and lead without being salesy, but seed and lead them into. Very different outcome required, very different pieces of content and the personal things that you might bring to your show. Another aha, to be really clear on what you want your audience to experience. That was particularly good because it was them, or it is them that you're serving, and you want to really create that experience that they need the most or highlight a way to achieve that. Yes, 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 and yes, very important. Well, I want to dive deeper into mistake number 1. And that mistake is not having a clear strategy. And this is really where it all begins. And I want to start off with one of my colleagues who mentioned to me that she produced a show for 2 years that was quite successful. People loved the topic. They loved what she spoke about. But she realized that continuing on with that podcast was weakening her brand, and she kind of wanted to transition into a different field. So she realized that it was off brand and was continuing to confuse her community. And in those aspects, she just needed to stop that. And that's not what I want to have happen to you. Another one of my guests on a podcast said, well, I'd gotten to episode 100 or over 100 before I finally determined how I'm going to leverage my podcast in my business. Now, I don't know about you, but I would not want to get to 100 episodes and still not being able to see some benefit and outcomes and inquiries and leads that are turning into customers. As I mentioned in workshop one of the reasons I stopped my very first co-hosted podcast was that we struggled to monetize it. And we'd assumed that people would listen and then rush on over to our websites and find out how they could work with us, which we know just did not work. So that's not what I want to have happen to you, to be publishing so many podcasts and not generate results. As I mentioned, we did not have a clear strategy and we stopped publication. And I was able to see after Women in Leadership was published, and I shared that story in workshop one, where I'd had my worst business failure ever yet. And I thought, you know what? And business failure, business ups and downs, it's just part of entrepreneurship. If you haven't had a massive failure yet, you haven't been trying hard enough. No, seriously, as businesses, don't be afraid of failure. I mean, failure can be the greatest teacher of all of the learnings and lessons, and the learnings and lessons that's relevant to you. And it can be very much part of what becomes your success system. The things that you overcame and the challenges that you overcame that become part of your story can very much be why people are following you. This example of Women in Leadership podcast, I started that podcast because after my business failure, and the partnership went by the wayside. I could not write, could not create content because I was just burnt out. But I could ask questions, and that's what I decided to do: interview other women in leadership who had gone through highs and lows, because I thought I'm going to surround myself with awesome people and let that inspire me forward. But something happened. 3 episodes in, published on my website, and all of a sudden I got 2 inquiries which turned into 2 4-figure customers, which I share here on that particular slide. And I thought, if I could identify exactly what I did and I could purposefully and intentionally recreate the success, what could happen? Which are the models that I just want to show you today, the 3 podcast profit models. Now, these took a little while to develop. So I'm sharing with you that if you're still going through the process of developing and pinpointing some of the milestones and some of the markers, the significant milestones and markers in your journey and in what you've learned, take time to develop those. Still bring them out to the forefront and start communicating them, but don't just yet start launching a podcast unless you've kind of got those developed. But anyway, model 1 is called my podcast profit formula. And these are the components that you need to build your authority while go from invisible to influential and profitable. And I'll share with you in a moment what the S, T, and U and the I to the power of 3 stand for. Model 2 is what I call my podcast profit framework. And this model is really the strategy that enables you to take your podcast from idea to launch successfully. So your overall podcast and why you're creating it, but then individual episodes in your podcast too can be used the framework, or can use the framework as you're developing each show. So that's model 2. Just do a bit of an overview of them first, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper. And then the third model, this is really the process. And this is what I call my podcast profit pipeline. And you can see there's a number of components that is in that pipeline. But this process is intentionally integrated, and it enables you to build awareness of you, build your authority as that trusted authority, while build know, like, and trust across the buyer's journey or customer journey, however you want to refer to it. And it enables you to nurture those listeners into leads and into inquiries and ultimately customers. So that's model 3. Let me just give you an overview of each of those again. So the profit formula is the process that enables you to build awareness of your authority. The framework is the strategy to take your podcast from idea to launch, and then your individual episodes from idea to publication. And then your pipeline is the process that enables you to build awareness, to really leverage all of the things that you're doing, including your podcast, to really build that know, like, and trust. So process, strategy, and then the components, the strategy, and then process. A bit of a typo on that one. Okay, let's have a look at what the S, T, and U and I to the power of 3 stands for, the formula. So S stands for strategy. It starts with strategy. If you don't have a clear strategy in place, how do you expect to achieve something that you haven't actually defined what that is? T stands for tactic. U stands for you, and I stands for influence, impact, and income. And so let's just look at that one more time. Strategy plus tactic plus you equals influence, impact, and income. Let me just see on the next slide what I've got there. Okay, I want to just go back to this previous slide. One of the things that I realized because I love to reverse engineer and look at what went wrong. I think we all need to do that, especially from if we want to take away opportunities to learn from our mistakes or what didn't go right. And I think often what we want to do is we want to ignore them and move on to bigger things. It's like at the end of every year, we think, you know what, this year was just, didn't achieve my goals. Don't really want to reflect on that because it's going to remind me of how much I didn't achieve. So I'm going to buy a new journal. I'm going to set new goals and start everything afresh. But what we don't realize is that we bring a lot of the mindsets and a lot of the disappointments with us if we don't address them and look at them first. And kind of, I almost thank those areas that didn't work for me, because for them, I can then look at things differently. Can I do something differently? What can I tweak? And then I realized when I did that with the strategy or the non-strategy that my colleague and I had, we had two very different businesses. We had two different stages of business. He was very new in his business, and my business was more progressive, more progressed as far as the time span. So I was working more with CEOs and C-suites. Not that I wasn't working with graduates and returning mums to workplace, returning to the workplace and all of that, but kind of a different audience. We certainly didn't have a call to action that really got listeners from our podcast back onto our list. We had two very separate businesses, it would have been two very separate calls to action. And there was a lot of different things that we didn't do. We also didn't really have a clear brand from a brand experience perspective. Although having said that, we really were able to bounce off one another and have an engaging conversation, and our guests always had fun, which is great, created a good experience, but that experience wasn't consistent across the pipeline. And so there were things that happened or did not happen that caused a break in that rapport. And people's time, we're busy, aren't we, and things happen and that kind of thing. And so because we didn't have that strategically integrated in our podcast, we lost opportunities, didn't have that tactic, and we really certainly didn't have a clarity on how we really were going to bring that forward, the you aspect of that. So let's talk about the framework. That really is the strategy, what I'm talking about. And we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into the area of purpose, because that is where we start off on the framework. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time, I know I certainly didn't, thinking about purpose, because if I had in the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, I would have been very clear in niching it, even refining it down even further. So specificity is key. If you're not specific and not clear, it's going to be very difficult for you to bring that forward in your content, in your messaging as well, in your podcast, but also the other aspects that you're marketing your business. So what outcome do you want from your podcast? And, there's a lot of different outcomes that I've seen already that many of you have said. You want to build your reach. You do want to be seen as that expert, that thought leader, that trusted authority. But let me give you an example of how being specific can determine a lot of different aspects, even from the podcast creatives, the introduction, the words that you can use. And I remember one client came to me and she had a lot of different ideas. She was unclear on what to focus on. And we kind of discussed that. And I said to her, well, look, what is the one outcome that you want from your podcast? If you could have one success, what would that be? And she goes, oh, that's easy. I really want to promote and sell my software. Well, just that alone enabled us to come up with a clear strategy in intro, because the fact that she was selling a software allowed us to see that the software was more for the professional user, someone who had been in the industry for many, many years in comparison to a newbie. And so that means the content that she would share and also the introduction mean that she needed to position herself very much as a veteran, very much as a pioneer, someone who very much had been in the industry for a long time, because a lot of her ideal customers would be skeptical, like, who is this, who is she, if they hadn't heard of her, although many people did. And so the content was very much going to be determined as well. And in actual fact, what she does now is she is in part of her podcast is she works through the different components and different features and functions of her podcast to help her existing customers familiarize themselves with her particular software as well. So one clear outcome determined all of the different strategies and things that we implemented for her. So here are some suggested additional outcomes that you can consider as well, because one of the things that I do when I'm working with a client is not only do we look at different outcomes that they want, but we also look at what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you have to help your clients or prospective clients overcome, so that by the end of listening to your podcast series or your ongoing podcast, that you're consistently speaking into some of those concerns and obstacles, so that you eliminate them, from a psychological background, that people are often, have got this won't happen to me. And then all of a sudden you share a testimonial where someone has beautifully said, I didn't think this would happen to me, but after implementing, so these little things nuances that you can incorporate can really be the difference between building engagement and really compelling someone to think, I think this is the right person for me to work with. So are there any specific areas of concern in your business, such as gaps? For instance, retaining customers. A podcast can be a fantastic way as a resource to be able to retain customers. Now, you might find that a podcast you can use, because remember, podcast is a medium by which you're sharing content via audio, and you can have podcasts like one of my clients did that was behind a paid membership model. So not something that she would give out externally for free, but rather used within her membership model and to retain customers. You might even use them not as a paid membership model, but rather as a value add for customers, because you're keeping them up to date with what's going on, and in a private, private client only resource or online hub that can works really well. Educating and upselling customers. If you've got a long customer buyer's journey, you know how often we're told as business owners we need to touch base and feedback, and touch and follow up's the word I'm looking for, with customers or potential customers through that buying cycle. Now, how awkward is it always to ring up, just ringing up, saying, catching up and saying hello. But imagine if you had resources in a podcast or a series that you would say, hey, just recorded this. I thought of our conversation that we had a couple of months ago and know that this is going to be of benefit. By the way, please feel free to subscribe, because all of the content I'm sharing is relevant for you as you continue to work in this area of your business. Fantastic to maintain that the touches, as you're nurturing those potential clients. What about if you have a change in business or corporate direction? I think at the moment, businesses, corporations who are currently their workforce has been scattered and working, what's the word I'm looking for? It's been a busy week across, globally, and also through working in their home office. They're no longer inside the office. as a team. Imagine if every corporation had an internal podcast where the leadership team could speak to and just really maintain that rapport and just sharing with what's going on, maintain that narrative. Because what happens when you don't, as a business, even as a corporation, if you're not maintaining communication with your staff, they will fill in with their own narrative remotely. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So, yeah, that's right. So, businesses, corporations, if you've got CEOs that can be interviewed, or even just sharing what's going on and sharing a message of hope that, we've got this, we appreciate you, all of that could be a fantastic resource to be able to share with your remote staff. Now, that's right. Kayleen said pivoting. If you're changing corporate direction. Now, I remember speaking to an organization years ago who had been long-standing in their industry. I think from memory, they were shoes or suits, men's suits, I think. And they were having one of the sons was taking over the business, and he wanted to inject some newness. He wanted to inject some innovation, whereas previously it had been for a certain, like, 40 years or so. So I said, well, rather than completely changing the brand message and losing people, why not bring those people on board, your existing customers, and even an opportunity to bring in new customers as they were targeting a newer market. Now, they could use a podcast, an internal podcast, or even an external podcast, to really start to communicate what was going on, and even kind of elicit, because a lot of the existing customers were a strong fan base. They loved the company, and a number of people tell me they don't like change. I love change. Change brings in newness, an opportunity to get in those creative juices growing. But you can bring those customers along to share in the journey. Just giving you some ideas here. I mean, coming up with ideas and then leveraging a podcast to be able to do that is key. Internal communication to deepen staff relationships is very important as well, and to build stakeholder morale. Okay. Here's another example. The Room Exchange was a client that I worked with, and she developed a 5-part podcast series, and she used that as part of going around Australia to raise capital. And she secured over 500,000 in venture capital. And that particular podcast, that was the outcome. And so we've removed that now, because now she's got her own podcast, which she's now speaking into, her customers and so forth. So again, what is the outcome? Develop a strategy to suit that. So that's what I want you to think about. What is the outcome that you want for your podcast? You need to consider this, and remember, specificity is something that is key. Maybe start off by saying, in 12 months from now, my podcast will, and then what you want to do is really look at reach, reputation, and revenue. So as always, let's just throw in a few examples. So again, specificity is key. But in 12 months, just say, for instance, in terms of reach, if you were a startup real estate and business, or your ideal customers with startup real estate businesses in Australia or Victoria, let's say, in the next months, 12 months from now, my podcast will have built my reach with 100 startup real estate businesses in Victoria. Now, that instantly is going to inform you on the different things that you need to do. For instance, what are startup real estate businesses challenged with? What are they interested in? What are the topics in the content? Where are they hanging out? Who are the people that also are dealing with real estate businesses in Victoria that I can start to develop a partnership with, an alliance with, a potential, remember I talked about collaboration, bringing some on as guests on your podcast. These are all things that can then inform you once you get clear on that outcome. Now, talking about reach, I want you to start thinking about that. In 12 months from now, your podcast will be specific. Be specific as you can. Who is that ideal customer? And maybe put a number on that. So go ahead and do that. We are going to go through this quickly. So I'm just giving you some things to start to consider. Now, remember, I talked about reputation equity. This is really important too. And so often, many people don't really define and get clear on what it is that they want, which is why they don't achieve it. So in 12 months from now, your podcast will, where do you want your reputation to have been built as the go-to business coach for real estate agents and businesses? What is it? What is it that you really want to achieve? Because for many of my clients, they are already thought leaders. If you look at their existing experience and what they're doing, it just is that not that many people know it yet, and so they really need to challenge the status quo, develop a strategic content development strategy and plan that's consistent, and also that's then brought forward within their podcast so that they really can consistently share a consistent message that positions them in that way. So what reputation, how and what and where? Susanna says, hi, Anne-Marie, thanks for the information. Can Actually, let me just show this and answer this. Can I pause the podcast without going back to the start, please? Yeah, you can. What you need to do, Susanna, and this is for anyone else who is listening and watching, when I finish going live, you can then go back and pretty much wherever you want to start the podcast or the live from then. So wait till it finishes and then you can go back and you can watch it again from wherever you want to start. So yes, you can. So, yes, please, where do you want to position your reputation as? Be as specific as possible. And, if you're in a very large niche, or has many people that are working in a specific niche, that's when you have to really even refine your specific kind of expertise as well. If I think about where for me, when I first started, there weren't that many people doing podcasts, but now it seems that because it's such a hot space, so many people are now tapping into the podcasting space. And why not? It's a great area. But where I really position myself is my own journey. I mean, and business building and reputation and reach and revenue through leveraging a podcast. That's my background, and all of the tools and the technologies and all of the mistakes that I made, they're mine. No one else can repeat that because no one else has had my journey and my story and my background and my training. And so, it doesn't matter how many people are entering my market because no one has my experience. Remember I said to you in workshop 1, start to market and create a category of one, and you will be the only person who is in that field. That's what I'm talking about. Where can you build that reputation that no one else can really say because they haven't had your experience and background? Okay, so talk about you. What is that going to be? What is that going to be? Reputation equity, so that you can intentionally show up. Often what I will do is I will observe and look at, well, what's happening in the marketplace and what are some of the challenges and why are those challenges? If I think about building trust now, Edelman Trust Barometer has done a study over the last 20 odd years. And the recent study that they had, the results showed that what creates trust is very different as what creates trust, 2 years, 3 years ago. And now it's on the back of people say they trust businesses through integrity, which is ethics, and competence, which is excellence. So that means moving forward, businesses are going to have to be very mindful about what content that they share, that it is integral, that it is very much aligned with who they are and what they can deliver. Because if you share a mistruth or you're trying to be someone that you're not, and that will be seen through and your audience will see through that, and that's not what you want to have happen. And so excellence too, we need to lead with excellence. Very important, as that builds trust. And those are the kind of things that I talk about. So I'm sharing this because there's going to be relevant things in your industry that you can observe what's going on with your market and with your ideal customers. How can you bring in what's happening in other areas that's going to just give even more depth to what you're able to share. So that's really important because that's going to reflect in the content that you share, and so very important. So here you go. I love Edelman. Edelman is one that I often will refer to, but I love the study that they did in partnership with LinkedIn in 2019, the B2B Thought Leadership Impact Study, and it showed that 87% of decision makers said that building thought leadership builds trust. They said that 89% of decision makers said building thought leadership enhances your reputation. 58% of decision makers said that they would choose a business because of their thought leadership. And 61% of decision makers said that they were willing to pay premium prices to work with a brand that was able to articulate a clear vision through their thought leadership. Now, that alone identifies the key things that decision makers, people who are making a decision of whether to work with you or not, are looking for. Thought leadership is so very important. So don't be someone that just says the same old that everybody else is talking about. This is where you really need to take a step back and look at your journey, all of the things that I've mentioned to you. That's so important. Don't just repeat the same old thing over and over again. And this is about the time that I do a check in with people, because as soon as I start talking about thought leadership, people often will say to me, there's no way. No, I'm not really a thought leader. Well, guess what? You are a leader of thoughts and opportunities and innovations and insights and lessons learned that you can share for your ideal client. Doesn't maybe mean that you're going to be a thought leader for the entire industry, but for your ideal customer who needs to hear in your words your journey, your insights, because you are the one that they want to work with. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about really honing in on your message and your story. Because if you don't see yourself as someone who's able to lead your ideal clients from where they're struggling to where they're just really kicking all of their goals, it's going to come through in your podcast. It's going to come through in all of your marketing. So please take time to really get clear and comfortable and confident with talking about that. So let's talk about revenue. Let's talk about revenue. So in 12 months' time, your podcast will. Now, for some of you, you may be thinking, well, I don't know. I have no idea. What you really want to focus on is if this is the outcome that you want, so you want to position yourself in, say, let's say X, Y, and Z, you have to make sure that if you're generating a lot of leads through your podcast, that the content is clear, that all of that is clear. But this is where you really put a flag in the sand and go, this is where I am going to position myself, and the revenue that I'm going to generate is going to be in this particular program. And this example was a 90-day triple your real estate sales results, just as an idea. You have to get clear on this. Put it down, put pen to paper or keyboard. Very, very important. Let's have a look about what it's going to look like for you. What revenue do you want to start generating, or in what area? What programs are you wanting to really start to promote and share more about? So this is where you need to plan out your podcast pipeline, which is guided by your program pathway. And this is your business model. And by the way, if you haven't got this in place, it's probably because you haven't got clear first on your core business foundations. Okay, so go back to workshop 1 if you're not sure what I'm talking about. So this is where I often talk about monetization on the podcast, because people think that monetization comes from advertising or sponsorships. Now, if you're a service-based business, I really encourage you to monetize your message first, which is through consulting, which is through coaching programs, which is through products, courses, that kind of thing. And so monetize your own message before you monetize someone else's. Yes, you can incorporate sponsorships, but it's a very different kind of a relationship than, say, if we're looking at mainstream media where they just get advertisers in to pay for certain ads, and 30 seconds or 15 seconds, whatever that is. Very different relationship that you're building with a sponsor when it comes to a podcast, because it can take you a while to build that engagement, that level of real engagement with your audience, and you can break that if you start to monetize with different ads and things like that. So just be mindful about that. All right, got a little bit of time for Q&A if there's any Q&As left. But really what we talked about today was the podcast profit formula. This is the components. We talked about the podcast profit framework, which was the overall strategy to start your overall podcast. But then you can use the framework to also launch and prepare and create your individual episodes as well. And then we talked about the pipeline, what the process was. We're going to dive deeper in workshop 3 into the actual pipeline as well, but we talked about the framework today. So, workshop 3, which is on Friday, is how to turn listeners into leads, inquiries, and paying customers from your very first episode. I'm going to talk about the tactic that I use and that all of my clients are implementing within their podcasts as they're launching their new podcast too. And remember, we've got a Q&A tomorrow, and that link's not yet working. It will work about 10 minutes after I finish today's call. All right, what questions do you have about anything that I shared today? I know that there's a lot of content that I shared. Leave your questions below. I've just got a couple more podcasts, a couple more slides to cover. This is about the prize, the scholarship. It's the 90-day Idea to Launch Your Thought Leader podcast program, and it's jam-packed full of great content and bonuses. So it starts 31st of August. You'll also not only access all of the modules in the program, you'll also get a private launch consultation call with me. We will map out your pipeline to profit, as well as emergency calls and all that kind of thing. And that's valued at I've got a 3497. You know, when I put my mouse up, it covers the content. So how to enter? All you need to do is share your biggest aha of each of the workshops. So number of people who have already gone through workshop 1 have left their aha. I will pin them as an announcement. You'll actually see the graphic. I'm going to share another one shortly after we finish this live on what was your biggest aha for workshop 2. And you get some bonus points if you take a picture with your workbook, your action guide, and then you tag me across different platforms. So if you're on Instagram, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can tag me, and that'll get you some extra points. But you find out more information, podcastingwithpurpose.com/win. And then that kind of gives you some indication on what you need to do. All right. So Kayleen says, this was so good. Thank you. You are welcome. You are very welcome. Let me just remove that. Good. So who has a question or who wants some feedback? Maybe you can just share your greatest aha here before we finish up. Or if there's no questions or no comments, then we can finish early, and then I'll release the aha post on the podcastingwithpurpose.com/community. You need to be in there to add your aha to go into the draw for the running of the scholarship. Who has got a question? Any questions? Let me just go back here. See if we've got anything. I think you guys have all been writing lots and lots of notes. Okay. So again, just write down your biggest aha, share it in the group, and I will be coming back there to check those out. Tomorrow we have the next Q&A. Okay. All right, let me just see there. I had trouble filling in the workshop sheets, the answers to the gaps. So the answers to the gaps will be I should have covered those within the actual live that we did today. But Kayleen, what's the biggest ones? Just list some down now, and I'll be happy to fill those out or direct you back to where you need to go to be able to fill those in. So share that in the comments, and I'll answer that before I go so that you've got what you need. While I take a drink of water. And did you want to write them down? Oh, all of them. Okay. Well, all of the gaps that are in the action guide, if you go back and watch the replay of this particular workshop that we just did today, you'll be able to find the gaps. And in workshop 1, you'll be able to find the gaps as well. So I hope that helps. Yes. And if not, leave the question. So maybe go back. That's what I would recommend that you do, Kayleen, is to go back and watch the replay, fill them in. And if you've still got questions, let me know somewhere in the community, and then I will make sure that I answer those questions tomorrow in the Q&A so that you've got what you need. Okay, well, I'm going to call it complete and hope to see you again here same time tomorrow as we go through the Q&A, and look forward to answering your questions, and I look forward to seeing your ahas. And if you're watching the replay, by all means, just put hashtag replay so that we know that you are catching up. And please put your aha in the special area in the podcastingwithpurpose.com/community so that you can go into the draw for the scholarship, which we will be drawing next Monday. All right, bye for now.